Hey guys, welcome to another Soul Encoded tutorial. Today we're talking about GitHub. Now if you haven't done my previous tutorial on Git, then you should probably check out that video before you do this one. But yeah, let's go right on to this write-up. What is GitHub? If you see this very cute icon or character right here, that's the Octocat. It's a very popular developer. It's probably the most popular character in the developer industry, but if you ever visit Silicon Valley, you'll see this cat all over the place. But it's because GitHub is that much useful and that much used throughout the developer community. Before we kind of move on, let's talk about some terminology here. What's a repository? A repository is essentially just a copy of your code base online. The origin is essentially an alias of a remote address to your GitHub repository. Now what's an alias? An alias is simply just saying, if let's say that you have something that's really long and cumbersome, you could alias that by making something that's shorter a representation of that something that's longer. That's what an alias is. Master is just a branch name that's usually it just happens to be called master. It's like by convention we call the master branch the default branch that gets created by Git and GitHub. Pull requests, short for usually people say PR, which is short for pull requests, but it's essentially proposed changes. Let's say someone makes changes, they'll make a PR and say, hey, I want to make these changes to the master branch or some other branch. What's forking? Forking is creating a local copy of, not a local copy, a personal copy of a repository. So let's say I have this particular GitHub tutorial repository on GitHub. You could make a fork of that and make your own personal changes without affecting this particular repository. Open source this is a very important topic, and I'll probably make another video on this, but essentially open source is free software that can be freely used, freely modified, and it's very common to use open source projects in your projects. And if you get really good at using them, you could prototype things very quickly and save you a lot of time for rebuilding things. But yeah, look into open source projects in your free time. And I'll definitely make another video on that. And I also added a link to the official glossary from GitHub, so look at more terminologies if you're interested. And moving on to the problem. What does GitHub solve? I briefly talked about the benefits of version control in the previous Git video, but for GitHub, what that does is, number one, it creates a central place where people could work off of. So one code base that everyone could work off of. And because it's in the cloud, it's very easy to collaborate with engineers. The reason why a lot of engineers can remotely work or work from home, etc., is because everything is online, right? And finally, with all of that, it makes open source possible, which is very important, as I previously talked about. And here's an example workflow. Now pay attention to this part because it's essentially what the challenge is going to be about. But let's say an engineer, if they want to work with GitHub, they'll create an online repository for a new project. They'll link that repository with like a local directory or code base. Then they could push that local code base up to GitHub. Now from the local directory, they could make a new branch, make some changes to the code base, push that code base / branch up to GitHub and make a pull request back into master. And then other developers can make comments and request changes or just review the PR, people usually say. And then if everything is good to go, they'll merge those changes, and then you could pull that master branch back into your local branch, and then you could continue working. So that's kind of a very simple workflow. There's definitely other ways you could work with Git, but that's just a common example. And here's the essential commands that you'll be learning how to do. Now, if you haven't done my command line tutorial video, I highly recommend you go do the command line challenges, or you're not going to know where to input this. But essentially, there's git fetch, which just fetches the latest changes from the online repository. Git pull, it fetches and merges from the online repository to your local directories. Git push pushes local committed changes to the online repository. Cloning, essentially an online repository makes a copy of it to the local repository and connects that as the remote. So git remote shows where the online repository is pointed. So, and also you could use git remote to change your local branch's remote address essentially. So those are the essentials for the commands that you are going to need to finish this particular challenge. And the challenge, if you haven't already, go ahead and create a GitHub account. Now, for the one thing to take note is try to make something that's professional. Don't make a silly username. You could get away with it if you're an amazing programmer, but if you're just getting started out, try to pick something professional, because GitHub, on average, GitHub is used as essentially your portfolio, right? Like an artist would have a portfolio of projects. With GitHub, you could essentially get a job just by having a really good GitHub account and marketing your GitHub account to, recruiters or people. If you are very interested in open source, you could, contribute that, make that into a portfolio piece, or have really interesting projects in your GitHub, and that could be a portfolio piece. But it's really awesome. So the thing about engineering, a lot of people complain that, hey, I have to take this. I have to take tests essentially when I get interviewed. But the cool thing about having GitHub is that you could show the work that you've done to a potential employee. So unlike other jobs, like let's say you're a product manager or something like that, it's really hard to display your set of skill set, right? But with this, they could just go in and see your commit history, see how you work, see your code itself, and get a good idea of what kind of candidate or developer you are without even talking to you, right? Most of the time, I could get a good sense of someone's level just by looking at their code base on GitHub. But, this is not to say GitHub is not by all like you have to have a great GitHub portfolio to get a great job, because a lot of people actually work on a private GitHub with their company, so their changes may not be shown. So just take this with a grain of salt, but it never hurts to have a great GitHub portfolio. So yeah, work on it, make sure it's professional, don't go crazy. So here's the steps to the challenge. It's essentially that workflow that I talk about. Create a repository, clone the repo to a local directory, make some changes, push those changes, create a new branch, make some changes on that branch, push those changes, make a PR to master, merge that in after reviewing it. If there's any merge conflicts, deal with that, and just pull those changes back to local. Yeah, very simple, but if you know how to do this, you could start any project essentially, right? And once you're done with this, then we're gonna get to the meat of the tutorials by learning JavaScript, HTML, CSS, interesting frameworks like React, Angular, and using Node, Express. All these things come after you master these kind of foundational things, just to get these tools, right? So here's an additional resources, GitHub guides. It's just more guides if you're interested in GitHub. But I encourage you to just try to solve this on your own by Googling things, watch other YouTube videos, whatever means necessary to get the job done. So I hope you guys join me in the solutions video, but if you don't feel like it, you can skip it and go to the next video. Cool. Thank you.